This morning we heard Bob Pittman say that we're spending too much money on television. He's from Clear Channel, so he would say that, but I think he's probably right if you listen to a lot of marketers. And we also heard that mobile is going to be the growth engine of advertising investment. In other words, we're talking about a lot of different screens competing for ad dollars. We're now having a session here in the Pantheon presented by Millward Brown about multi-screen, and the nature and the scale of multi-screen usage is specifically what they're going to talk about. They've just promised me that there is some data in here which is hot off the press that you haven't seen before, even if you were at the Festival of Media in Asia. So I'd like to welcome to the stage Duncan Southgate, who's Global Director for Digital at Millward Brown, and Vincent Blaney, who's European Brand Director, Media and Digital for Millward Brown.
Thanks very much. In the next 25 minutes or so, we're going to take you through what we've learned about multi-screen marketing and try and make sense of what is a rapidly evolving and very interesting space. We knew we'd be competing with smartphones and tablets and laptops, perhaps, as people will be working. I didn't realize we'd be competing with so many plates of pasta, but we are in Italy, so off we go. We're going to try and run through 4 chapters to our little story today. The power of 4 is going to get us through this story. First of all, we're going to talk about why we think multi-screen is so important, why we think it's the biggest shift in the marketing landscape right now, and what we've done to try and help understand that. Then we're going to look at how people are using different screens. So, like this over lunch, we have certain behaviours at conferences and at work, but how is it affecting the average consumer around the world?
And then the second part of the session is going to be about what people think of ads on screens. And finally, what should we do about it? Or what should we start doing about it? They're the 4 areas that we're going to focus on today.
Just to add another layer of entertainment to the whole thing, there's 4 screens we're going to cover. For the fans of digital outdoor, unfortunately, we're not going to be talking about digital outdoor today. We are going to be talking about TV, laptops and PCs, and I will be embodying those 2 screens today.
And I'm going to be the mobile devices. We have practiced this. We're not normally a double act, so hopefully it works quite well. I'm going to be smartphones and tablets. There aren't going to be any corny jokes, don't worry.
Okay, and we're going to finish up with 4 recommendations for brands. So that's the power of 4. So why do we think multi-screen marketing is so important and and there's still so much to learn about this space? Well, if you just start with the devices themselves and look at the shipment data, then it's clear that something fundamental is happening in the way people are consuming media. Unfortunately, my TVs and tablet and laptops are dwindling. So TV shipments last year were down about 5%, and laptop shipments were down about 10%.
And when we're talking about smartphones and tablets, we're getting to over 1 billion smartphones now, and well over 200 million tablets. A growth of around 30% or just over 30%. When we think about tablets, the shipment numbers are very similar to TV. So we're talking huge shipments of those 2 mobile devices, especially smartphones.
Okay. So the kit people have got is radically changing, but how they're using those different screens? That was where we wanted to take the research. And what does that mean for marketeers? So we spoke to multi-screen users. That means people who have either a smartphone or a tablet. And they also have access to TV. Just in doing that, we also picked up over 90% of this sample actually also had a laptop or a PC. So most people have about 3.5 of these 4 devices we're going to talk about today in our sample. We did the interviewing. We have Alistair from On-Device Research here today, via On-Device Research on people's smartphones or tablets. That was our way of ensuring that we had a relatively leading-edge sample, people who didn't just have one of these things, but actually knew how to use it. So that was the methodology. We did a really nice job of spreading this work around the world. In just a matter of a couple of months, we managed to cover 30 countries and 12,000 survey respondents. So, what have you ended up with?
We did think that you wouldn't have plates and knives and forks in front of you. What I was going to say was, if you want to have a play around with the online deliverable while you listen to us, if you want to have a play around afterwards, go ahead. If you're having lunch, you might have to wait a little bit later, but millwardbrown.com AdReaction, all this data's online, free access for you to play around with, look at specific markets, look at the global data that we're going to talk about today, but please go and have a play. Have a play now if you get a little bit bored or if you miss something while you're tucking into your pasta.
So Millward Brown's never given away this much free data ever before, so we hope you like it. The first main finding is this is our Mary Meeker chart. So if you look at my share of minutes, TV and laptops, I'm still the majority of minutes spent in an average country around the world. So 27% of screen minutes for an average person in an average day is still spent watching TV. And about 26% of that time is spent accessing the internet via a laptop or PC. So this is excluding messing about on email, doing your PowerPoint, writing your Word reports, time accessing the internet.
And just under half of all of our time spent using devices is spent using mobile, with 35% of that via smartphone. So the largest screen globally is smartphone now. Now this varies across market, across regions. You've got regions like AMAP, which is higher, and in Europe where there's it's a much even split between TV, laptop and smartphone still, but the pattern's there in terms of the presence of smartphone, if you like.
And here's our seamless link to the session you've just heard in the main forum with Zenith Optimedia talking about how mobile ad spend is scheduled to rocket. Let's look at where we are and where Zenith are saying we're going to get to by 2016. They were talking about overall share of media, but if you just focus in on the screen world, currently TV spend is about 66% of all screen media spent globally, and laptops take up about 29%. And that is due to slide a little bit. Laptops are going to maintain their share, whereas TV share is going to drop to about 60% by 2016.
When we think about mobile, if we actually group those two, we're talking about 4% at the moment and 12% by 2016. So you think about all those sessions this morning, particularly David's session, I can kind of understand why the predicted growth is still quite low. If we are just talking about these mobile banner ads, for example, it does feel that there is more focus on the whole idea of utility. So the presence of search in mobile is obviously one of those things, the easier thing to do if you like, versus the more creative, more entertaining, more engaging type of content that you'd like to produce.
So even if mobile grows to 44 billion, really, there's still going to be a huge gap between time spent and where money's going. So that's the setup. So now let's look at how screens are being used. So we looked at different screens. We looked at the first question we asked people was when they were using these different screens through the day. And you get this kind of simple profile, which makes fairly logical sense. So let's look at the blue line first, my TV viewing. There is some TV viewing during the day, obviously, but that is a massive peak between 6 p.m. and midnight. Whereas if you look at laptops, which is our yellow line here, that picks up pretty early in the day, by about 9 a.m., but is then fairly steady throughout through the day till about 9 p.m., at which point it tails off. But I'm really only two small pieces of a much bigger media day.
And being the most intimate device, my mobile phone is with me all day. Will be no surprise to anybody in the room, and my level of usage is fairly consistent throughout the day as well. But then when we look at tablets, that sort of second mobile device where we're seeing grow as well, it's a bit of a different pattern at the moment. There is a steady increase in usage over time, but the peak, if you like, is more towards that sort of evening period where we see the peak of TV as well. So there is a bit of a difference in the pattern between those two devices at the moment, which is quite interesting.
And one of the, you can play around with this chart within the online deliverable that Vince talked about, but one of the key findings for us really was that there isn't much variation in this by country. There is more evidence of the Japanese still playing with their smartphones at 3 or 4 in the morning than some other nations, but broadly these patterns are fairly consistent around the world. What does vary, however, is the screen minutes, both the absolute number overall and the numbers of minutes being used across different devices.
Yep, and I can promise this first piece of data wasn't picked on purpose because of where we are, but if we look at the highest and lowest overall minutes across the markets we surveyed, in terms of the highest, we're talking about Indonesia with 540 minutes. So for those that, like me, can't divide that by 60 relatively quickly, that's 9 hours of screen time every day used by people in Indonesia. And we're in Rome. The lowest market globally for overall screen time usage was Italy with 317. That's about 5 hours. So there's a 4-hour screen time difference between those two markets. And again, all the rest of the market data is in here if you want to have a look at the individual markets in the online deliverable.
And again, TV minutes, you would think that's a fairly established medium, but if you're looking at multi-screen users, the number of TV minutes varies quite a lot by country. So that's actually highest in the UK. It's also pretty high in markets like France and Spain. But it's just about 2.5 hours in the UK, whereas that goes down to just over an hour in Vietnam. Now, you could point to the TV quality and all kinds of other environmental reasons. And it's also probably partly because the multi-screen users, the number of people with a smartphone and a tablet, is quite a mainstream audience in the UK, whereas it's more of a niche audience in Vietnam. But that's one big difference we've seen there. And we also saw a big variation in laptop minutes. So a lot of the Eastern Bloc countries like Russia and Poland and Slovakia had very high laptop minutes, but the highest number of laptop minutes globally was over in China. And that goes as low as 65 minutes in Kenya. And it wasn't because the people we were talking to didn't have a laptop. The majority of our sample also had a laptop in Kenya. They're just spending a lot less time accessing the internet via that device.
And then finally, when we go to smartphone, I'm sure most of you would guess where one of the markets would be with high smartphone usage. Well, the highest market was actually in Nigeria, with over 3 hours of smartphone usage a day. We'd also think about AMAP markets as well, if we think about markets that have high smartphone usage. And the lowest, which surprised me, was France, with 79 minutes, so one of the European markets with the lowest level of smartphone usage during the day.
So these are the numbers that we definitely recommend you pass on to your colleagues, but make sure they look at the local figures by country rather than just looking at the global average, which hides a lot of variation. One slightly more consistent story is how people are using these devices. So some people would say that multi-screen usage is really just when 2 devices or more are being used at the same time. Now, we wanted to put that multi-screen usage, what we're calling simultaneous screen usage, in the wider context of all the minutes of the day. So if you look across all the countries we looked at, on average, about 1/3 of all the minutes that people are spending consuming screen media is TV plus another digital device. So that means that basically, by magic, you can consume 7 hours of screen media and it only takes you 5 hours. What we wanted to do, though, is understand that simultaneous usage a lot more. So
we've got 2 different types of simultaneous usage, which I'm sure, again, most of you have heard of. You're meshing, where you're using your second device for related content that you're watching on TV, and stacking, where you're using your device for unrelated content. In terms of the split, we've got 14% of people saying they mesh when they're using the device simultaneously, and the larger proportion, 22%, stacking, so using their device for unrelated content that's on TV. So still, from our perspective, in both of those areas, a really good opportunity for brands. But when we actually start to think about why people are actually meshing or stacking, that's when it becomes really interesting. So we also asked our consumers what the key reasons that they stacked, and also the key reasons why they were meshing. And again, when you think about stacking, to fill in time during ad breaks, well, we've always looked for ways to fill in time during ad breaks. It's always been there. Obviously, it's the job of the advertisers to make us stop, look up, come back in the room and watch an ad that's relevant to us. Not all those ads are always going to be relevant. But then there's also obviously the new phenomenon of actually using social media while we watch TV as well, not specifically related to the content we're watching, but just to catch up with people whilst we're in front of the box. And other areas, like actually just not finding TV interesting enough. There's certain markets that are quite high for that. For markets like Turkey, for example, where people just say they don't find TV interesting enough. With meshing, the key reason to mesh is to find out about more information about what's on TV. Let's have a natural link, if you like, between the two, to use your second device to inform what's entertaining you or talking to you while you're on TV. And then also to discuss what you're watching. We're seeing that sort of rise in people talking about programs, live events, sort of dramas, soaps, etc., while they're actually watching TV. So those are the key reasons. But in both areas, there's a good opportunity or a strong opportunity for brands to get involved.
I think there is a bit of a temptation to simplify this down and say stacking bad, meshing good, because meshing is the opportunity to pull 2 screens together. Stacking is them people being dragged away from the screen that you're advertising, that you've spent good money on. But I think it's not quite as simple as that. There's some good posts that are up on the Millward Brown site discussing how if people are stacking but then they turn back to the TV because your TV ad has captured their attention, there's quite good neuroscience evidence that interrupted stacking can get you to a higher level of attention. So it's definitely important to understand those reasons that people are using multiple devices. But let's now look at how given that context of what people are doing, what the marketeer's challenge is to either to take advantage of this overall opportunity and the landscape, and also whether you can bring screens together so that 1 + 1 = 3. And if we look at my screens of TV and laptops, so TV is blue there and laptops is yellow. This is the scale of opportunity. This is the minutes chart that the minutes that we've been discussing up until this point. And we're now overlaying another axis, which is receptivity. So we ask people how favorable they are towards ads on different platforms, and we also ask them how much attention they tend to pay to those ads. So this has been the core of AdReaction for the past decade, this receptivity axis. And this is where TV pulls ahead of the pack. So people are familiar with TV ads, they like them, they feel entertained by them, they're positive about them in a way that they simply aren't with digital ads.
When we think about mobile devices, as Duncan said, we do this study, we've been doing this study for many years. The last study we did was actually on mobile, and favourability or receptivity towards mobile devices was lower when we looked at it versus online. So from my perspective, this is good news. We're seeing much more of a balance between our mobile devices' receptivity and also with laptops as well. As you can see, the minutes being used, if you combine those two, the opportunity is fantastic. Now, there are differences regionally when you look at this, but the difference between TV and other devices is always roughly the same. So overall receptivity may change in a market like France, where they're less receptive to advertising, but the difference between devices, TV and other devices, is roughly the same when you look at them across the board.
Yeah, so that pattern's fairly consistent globally. So that's 2 dimensions. Let's add a third dimension. That's how big's the opportunity? What do people think of ads? Well, the third dimension is, do they actually work? So this is where Millward Brown's got thousands of effectiveness studies to draw on, both online, mobile ad effectiveness studies, and also multimedia, cross-media effectiveness studies. What we've done is simplify that down to one metric: how much is the average brand metric impacted per person reached? And what that gives us is a very interesting story. So with TV, there's no better medium at driving salience, reminding people about your brand or building awareness for a new brand. TV knocks it out of the park. It's also pretty good at communicating messaging. Even if people are a bit distracted, not paying full attention, they're still taking enough out of those audio-visual ads that they are getting messaging quite strongly. It's maybe a little bit less good lower down the purchase funnel when you're talking about trying to drive purchase intent. But then again, it's a mass medium, so it's not so tightly targeted. The profile of laptop impact is almost the inverse. So they're okay at driving awareness, they can do that. And they're okay at communicating messages as long as it's one and it's simple. But they're probably best at driving purchase intent, which is, again, makes sense because of the targeting capabilities of online and the scale. It gives you the potential to deliver on those, so they tend to be better at lower purchase funnel metrics.
And when I think about mobile devices, you can see from the chart here, we're in a pretty good place at the moment from the data we've looked at. Fairly strong response across the board. There's a couple of, from our perspective, linked reasons for that. The first being, we're talking about very intimate devices here. We're talking about things that are very close to us and very personal. And the link there from an advertising point of view is that you can target someone in a very personal way and in a very close way to them. But the key there is, whereas in the past that whole idea of targeting may be quite niche, here you can actually reach a lot of people in a very, very targeted way. So you can get some really strong responses. On the flip side, you can also get some very strong responses the other way if you don't do it properly. We saw some examples of some lovely mobile banner ads earlier on. So I think the opportunity is there, but it needs to be treated in the right way. Otherwise, you can lose people if you advertise them in the wrong way, especially in a very intimate space, much more intimate than the laptop PC world that we've seen rise over recent years.
So to some extent, you've got to choose between devices and choose based on the way they've worked to build brands. But you've also got to connect devices. So we asked about, this is the same sort of concept, but we asked about lots of different ways that advertisers are trying to connect screens. Same 2 kind of dimensions. This is how familiar are people with these approaches, and this one is how much do they like them. So people are really familiar with, for example, a TV ad with a web URL, a TV ad that drives people to a Facebook page. They're now accepted, and they're moderately receptive to those things. They think that's a pretty good idea. They're also very familiar with the concept now of TV ads promoting a mobile app. So connecting devices up is okay. We were a little bit surprised to see TV ads with hashtags down here, which I personally like a lot. I'm a bit of a Twitter fan. But that's actually varied quite a bit by country. So in the US, UK, Brazil, where Twitter is a big phenomenon, that familiarity and receptivity much higher, but it's not really yet a global currency, partly because Twitter's got a very lopsided global profile, and it's still a relatively unestablished approach in some markets.
And again, coming back to those that are in the session this morning, if we look in the top right-hand corner, micro videos, the opportunity for micro videos across platforms is huge. Lots of people have noticed them, and the receptivity is really high as well. So I would echo what we heard this morning in terms of the future of these much shorter pieces of video content to reach our audience. And then there's that technology thing as well. So we don't just talk about mobile and tablet in terms of a screen. Think about it as a technology, the way that we can link up our channels. So sponsored mobile play-along for live TV events, using technology to enhance that TV experience and how a brand can get involved in that. There's an example actually coming up shortly of how that can work really, really well.
So I think these are quite abstract concepts, so let's dive into some examples. And this is our fourth and final chapter. So what should brands do? Well, we're taking the learning from this study and trying to boil that down into 4 concise, simple things you can take away. We think that multi-screen campaigns should be consistent, connected, considered, and concise, and we'll try and bring that to life with 4 examples. So let me start with why brands should be consistent. The data says that they should be consistent because most of people's time, over 2/3 of people's time, is still spent just jumping from device to device. They're not using 2 at the same time, they're using 1, and it could be at any kind of time in the day. And you don't really know when they're going to reach out or fall into your target market. So being consistent across screens is priority number 1. Pepsi knew that they were going to be advertising in the Super Bowl and sponsoring the halftime show. So it's a massive deal for them, spending a lot of money on that. They know they're going to have 100 million people watching their halftime show. So they worked back from that, and they were hugely consistent on this theme of the halftime. They were going to own halftime for a month. So they started 1 month before the Super Bowl, bang in the middle of North America, with a country and western concert, with a big viral PR campaign around that. And then for the rest of the month, they owned halftime through tweets, through Vines. They sponsored the halftime show at the Grammys. They did all kinds of things building around the halftime concept. And then they nailed it on the Super Bowl night itself with a great ad just before the halftime interval. Then a very, very successful show with Bruno Mars and the Red Hot Chili Peppers. 115 million people watched it, biggest show ever, and they saw a greater increase in traffic to their website than any other Super Bowl advertiser. So consistency across screen, consistency, albeit for just 1 month, they owned that concept, and that worked well for them.
And although concise is not coming up till the end, I'm conscious that we are low on time, so I'm going to try and be a little bit more concise when I think of this one. But in terms of being connected, this is a great example. So Domino's teaming up with the X Factor to produce an app and to sponsor the program makes perfect sense in terms of the brand and the show, which is great. But I think the clever piece here is this whole idea, again, of talking about the utility element. I mean, mobile's not just about entertainment, it's about utility as well. And I think this is where Domino's got it right, where actually you could order your pizza through the app at the same time. So it's not just about sponsoring, it's about providing something that's useful to the consumer in that sponsoring content. I think this is where brands need to get it right in mobile. It's not just about linking up with something, it's about actually providing a useful part of that content as well.
Okay, we're going at Shingy speed now. So recommendation number 3 is to be considered. We've already shown you that different screens have different strengths in terms of building brands. They can also be used to segment your audience. So in Germany, a supermarket chain called Edeka did this in a fairly radical way. They had a very safe TV ad that communicated the idea of their high-quality own-label products with 2 cute kids in a supermarket. But they took that same message and delivered it in a much more wacky, risky, crazy way online with a German electro rocker called Friedrich Lichtenstein and a wacky video called Supergeil, which has gone crazy online, and you can send Supergeil videos to your friends telling them how super awesome and super sexy they are. So they would never have taken that risk on TV. So again, you can be very considered in the way you use screens. And finally,
and then to be concise, Vivo in Brazil used a nice TV ad, but they used a hashtag to really drive that multi-screen usage. So the hashtag, it's wonderful, it's good, really just asking people to share moments of of goodness or wonderfulness in their life, and that really helped drive that campaign across screen using social media, but a very, very simple, concise way of doing it.
We did some qualitative research alongside this study that also told us that that multi-screen is also an awful lot about collaboration. That's not just a media owner or a media agency or a creative agency problem. Collaboration is the key to breaking through the barriers and creating the best campaigns across screens. So please do talk to us if you'd like to learn more about this research or effectiveness studies with Millward Brown. And thanks for coming. Thanks for sharing your lunchtime with us.
Thank you.